This was it. The perfect evening, a cold beer and an ebook, but I hadn't started reading. I just wanted to relax with a sip of beer. It was a much-needed moment of calm, just being alone. I craved solitude at the time. The sun was setting, painting the sky with warm colors. There was no wind, and the sea was like glass. The noise was just serenity. My yacht was anchored in a secluded bay off a small Greek island. It was tiny but perfect, with no one around and a good anchorage. Anchoring the yacht had been tricky, needing a second mink point in the tiny bay. But the manual labor was a welcome change after a lazy day's sailing. Now everything was set. The beer was cold and the silence was welcome. It was cold and silent, but then I started thinking about Sarah. When I was idle, it was a struggle to shake these thoughts. I rarely dwelled on the good times, doubting their authenticity. I used to think I was in love, but now I see it differently. Her love seemed genuine, but maybe it was just a performance. Anger bubbled up, but I pushed it away. I focused on the sea, the sun, and the pigeons, those underrated creatures to watch. I just needed to relax. It came up, but I pushed it away, focusing on the sea, the sun, and the pigeons, which are underrated creatures to watch. I decided to recheck the moorings, though it was unnecessary, and it distracted me from thoughts of betrayal. I plunged into the sea impulsively to clear my mind, avoiding the rage that had consumed me lately. I was trying to spare others from my outbursts by isolating myself. My sister had warned me I was a ticking time bomb, which prompted my hermit lifestyle. I even went over to a cave for sanity's sake. But I'm back on board now. I cook to occupy myself. Sarah's absence in the kitchen echoes her absence in our partnership. I'm focusing on making an I-made-an omelette. I liked the fact that this public spot was rarely visited by others, which made it more appealing. I enjoyed a quiet dinner on deck as the calmness increased with the fading daylight. The cliffs were glowing in the sun's last rays when a motor suddenly disrupted the silence, indicating an unwelcome intrusion. The motorboat was coming closer, spoiling my peaceful night. It was too late to escape to another island because the boat was getting closer and closer. The man in the black suit was shouting over the music, trying to get the attention of the people on the yacht. He said that the boat belonged to Lucas. Said I had to move my boat because he was royalty and needed privacy. I laughed and said no, this was public property and I'd been here first. I was a bit annoyed but kept my cool. He tried to provoke me but it didn't work. He left, unsuccessful. I went back to my beer until he came back offering me $5. I found it amusing and dismissed his offer with a curt remark. He left again and later their ship relocated to a nearby spot uncomfortably close. I tried to stay calm, treating the spectacle as free entertainment. Their ship resembled a circus with brightly lit decks, some passengers behaving oddly with men strutting and women in high heels and bikinis. I wondered what kind of deck they had. I'd never allow high heels on my teak deck, but they seemed standard. On the ship, the men paraded around while the women served as decoration. Their behavior baffled me. They likely held a low opinion of me as if we were from different planets. In addition to the peacocks and bikini-clad women, there were men in black suits, clearly bodyguards and crew members in white uniforms. Some of the models were merely slim, while others were alarmingly thin. They resembled a gathering of malnourished souls. Occasionally, they glanced down at me. On my boat, they stuck out like a sore thumb, entrenched in their glamorous world. They were hosting influential figures, while I was just a solitary guy with a beer. I believed my life was better than theirs, but I wondered what the women on board were thinking. Perhaps they were seeking wealthy partners for status and security before aging out of their careers at a mere 22. I realized I was ignorant of their world. How long could models work? 20, 30, 40. I had no idea. I thought back to Sarah's deceitful intentions to marry and divorce a wealthy man, including her betrayal. It still stung, and it was still affecting my life in a negative way. The present distraction came from a commotion on the nearby yacht, where a woman clashed with a group of men, including Lucas. You could easily identify him by his overweight figure. His bodyguard was nearby, and the tension was thickening, as if violence was about to happen. They suddenly noticed me. I stopped them from fighting, so I gave them a casual salute with my beer. They went back inside, leaving the woman to fend for herself. She was fighting against them, but no one was helping her. She was trapped on their boat with no way out. She tried to run away, but the men were chasing her. She was scared and asked the other passengers for help, but they ignored her. Her cries were a stark reminder of her plight, and I was sickened by their greedy behavior. Despite her desperate pleas, the bystanders remained silent, turning a blind eye to her distress. I was even considering grabbing my camera when the girl suddenly leapt overboard, surprising everyone, including myself. Despite the height of the fall, she landed gracefully, even in her high heels. It was a bold move, but it wouldn't save her. There was nowhere for her to go. She swam towards me, still looking elegant, though I was no longer admiring the sight. She was encroaching on my personal space. I couldn't send her back to those creeps. I couldn't live with myself if I did that. The alternative was to take her in, sacrificing my cherished solitude. I'd also have to endure the company of a woman I'd sworn I'd never do that with again. That's just what I didn't need right now. A woman at my side would likely be a model, spoiled and entitled. I could almost she was complaining about not having a place in the world without women. I thought about joining a convent, maybe. I wondered if those monks were truly eunuchs or if they just seemed that way. She was still swimming toward me. I was panicking. It was too late to weigh anchor now. I couldn't refuse her boarding. She looked like she was in trouble. Fine. I'd take her to the nearest port tomorrow. As she reached the gangway, I assisted. I didn't think I was going to have much of a conversation with her. I've never been good with women. I needed to keep my distance to avoid getting hurt again. That decision calmed me a bit. I wasn't going to let another woman ruin my composure, not after months of regaining it. She looked at me questioningly, so I offered my hand without saying anything. I might have had a guest, but that didn't mean I was going to chat all day. The situation was clear. She knew I had witnessed I was on Lucas's ship and I was happy to help. When she got off the boat, she was still wearing heels. I pointed to her shoes and she quickly understood. She apologized and took them off. I introduced myself as Emma. Manny, I muttered. I was already fumbling after only a few seconds with female company. She extended her hand again. I guess our first handshake didn't count since I'd only helped her aboard. I shook her hand. This time, it was a proper greeting and a show of gratitude. She stood there for a while, letting me get used to her being there. Maybe she was letting me adjust to her unexpected intrusion. It was a thoughtful thing to do after imposing herself on me. I wondered why a woman with any semblance of sensitivity had been aboard that ship. I dreaded hearing her story. Eventually, I assessed my new guest. Emma was stunningly beautiful, fitting for one of Lucas's companions. I was surprised to find that she wasn't as young as I had assumed. She was likely in her early 20s, only a few years younger than me. Emma wasn't just attractive, she was downright beautiful with sharp features and perfect green eyes. Despite her slender frame, she didn't appear malnourished like some of the others. Her long, damp hair obscured its true color, but it was undeniably luscious compared to Emma's. Sarah paled in comparison, making me realize how out of my league she had been all along. A few years ago, I would have been thrilled to meet someone with such good looks, but I'd since decided to exclude women from my life. Sarah's betrayal was the reason for this decision, but I could still admire Emma's beauty. I kept telling myself that she didn't stir any emotions in me, but after a brief pause, she met my gaze again, thanking me with a hint of insecurity that surprised me. Women like her weren't supposed to be timid. I was expecting her to take what she wanted and move on, but it was clear she needed my help. I didn't have much time for small talk, so I grunted, offering her the towel. She looked puzzled but accepted it. Eventually, she smiled, probably thinking I was a grumpy sea dog, which suited me fine. It wasn't far from the truth. Glancing at the brightly lit ship, I saw Lucas in animated discussion with his bodyguards. Perhaps he was contemplating. I was boarding my yacht to get Emma back. Piracy in Greek waters would be trouble for anyone, let alone someone like Lucas. He could easily replace her. He was used to success in everything he did, even a game of chance. But what did I know? I reminded myself not to delve too deeply. I needed to stay out of these odd characters' lives. I glanced back to find her looking at the scene. Her expression was now concerned, not arrogant. Hopefully, that fool. He doesn't send his goons to snatch me, she said. He might. Lucas has got 4 bodyguards he could send after us. Maybe we'll swim away tomorrow, I responded, keeping my tone curt to maintain distance. Okay, I can't say I'll sleep well. I'm still a little worried. Thanks again for saving me. She said they were just about to mistreat me. I was surprised by her nonchalant responses. She blurted out before going on to ask about my curiosity. She said that Lucas, his male guests, his bodyguards, and all the male crew had made a bet. He said he'd entertain every girl at least once before the ship returned to Italy. The other girls weren't thrilled about it, but he let them do it anyway. I suddenly realized I just couldn't take it anymore. I'd put up with a lot of things without getting anything for it, but today it became too much. I said no to Lucas, and, with one little dive, my career went down the drain. That part of my life is now in the past. She looked surprised at her own revelation. I nodded and emitted a grunt, trying to sound sympathetic. This fashion business is a total waste of time, she said. Yeah, you're right. Maybe it's even better this way. There's nothing I can do about it now. I should just leave the old stuff behind and try something new. New opportunities will arise. Life is about change. Her unexpected optimism returned. How could she brush off something that completely shattered her perceived life? I wished I could, or could I? I'm always hungry. It's part of my job. I've been hungry for 10 years. No, stop it, you fool. Okay, just stop it, to distract myself. I headed below deck to prepare scrambled eggs for her. She followed, glancing around as I silently passed her a plate of omelets. It was surprisingly difficult to maintain a solemn mood with her presence, but it was necessary. There was no point in allowing myself to become fond of her, and I was certain nothing good would come of it. Oh yes, this looks very appetizing, thank you. Do you live here alone? She inquired. I nodded, striving to limit my interaction with her to a bare minimum to avoid being influenced by her cheerful demeanor. Emma asked if she could borrow some clothes. She hadn't had time to pack. I nodded and fetched some clothes from my aft cabin. I couldn't keep scowling when faced with that smile for long. I instructed her to take one of the forward cabins. Thanks, are they all free? She asked. I nodded again. Why does a man like you live all alone? How do you keep women at a distance? She asked. Her question was so blunt that the sheer shock on my face prompted her melodic laugh. She took pity on my confusion. Never mind. I'm going. It's a bit cold in this wet bikini, she said, smiling. Her smile was warmer than that of a mannequin. She turned and headed forward, leaving me staring after her. She was just as stunning from behind as she was from the front. I shook my head, trying to comprehend her words. Sarah had always insisted I was just an ordinary guy, nothing special or attractive about me. I was lucky to have her, she claimed, and I believed her. Now this incredibly beautiful woman, a genuine model, was asking me how I kept women at bay. I supposed I had a bit of time while she changed to ponder that question. 2 minutes later, she approached, somehow making my old, worn sweatpants look better than they should. She changed swiftly, contrasting with Sarah's leisurely pace. I found myself amused at the thought of a woman dressing quickly. Hey, you might have a friendly face, I said. I don't think so. As grumpy as you're trying to seem, she said, almost coaxing a smile from me. It was kind of working, as her hair dried, revealing her brunette locks. I silently scolded myself. Would you mind if I stayed below deck? I don't want to remind Lucas that I'm here, she asked. I affirmed. I realized that my attempt at brevity sounded absurd even to me. Okay, I'll see you tomorrow. Would you mind if I borrowed your e-book reader? She continued. My only company was a cup of coffee, which didn't seem to mind. I could have lingered in bed, but I knew that thoughts of Sarah would have haunted me. Even without her, I found comfort in my sullen mood, lamenting how life had treated me with Sarah. The noise from Lucas's vessel had stopped around 4 in the morning. The ship now resembled a ghost ship. They probably wouldn't stir until noon, but wait, I heard movement below deck. My uninvited guest seemed determined to shatter the mental image I had formed of her. She was over 20, not childish, and surprisingly not hot. Even when faced with she was rude, and now she was an early riser. What next? A certified mechanic in the morning. She greeted me cheerfully as she popped up from the hatch. I replied, still wearing my usual grumpy expression. She asked for coffee. I grunted and she disappeared below deck. She seemed just as sharp as I was in the morning. I turned to the bay. Its calm surface was now tainted with visions of Sarah and her lover mocking me. I couldn't help but feel annoyed. Now that she'd had her coffee, Emma was making her way back up on deck. She'd be chipper and ready to engage in conversations about topics I wasn't interested in and she'd flash that gorgeous smile. I didn't need anyone trying to lift my spirits. I didn't have the right to wallow in solitude. Emma, her name caught me off guard once more. Without a word, she settled beside me on the deck, gazing out at the tranquil sea. The morning air was. The air was still crisp and untouched by the harsh sun, making everything around her feel surreal. The memory of Sarah faded, and silence enveloped us until Emma broke it with a sudden question. So, what's the deal? You saved me. What do I owe you? Her demeanor hinted at apprehension, as if she were bracing herself for. I quickly realized that unwelcome news is that everyone who helped you in the past wants something in return. I blurted out my thoughts, regretting my candor immediately. I certainly didn't need to delve into her past, but her question had caught me off guard. I replied, yeah, pretty much. Your life must be pretty crappy then. I knew that any woman as beautiful as her would have men lining up to do her favors. Yes, she replied, her expression serious, her pretty face looking utterly miserable. I glanced at her, then looked away, unsure of what to say. The silence grew uncomfortable. It was a smart move to leave before Lucas and his crew woke up. Is there anything I can do for you on the ship? I asked softly, surprised at my own gentleness. No, she answered firmly, as if she were giving up her life in the world of high fashion and all that it entailed. I nodded and prepared to leave. I hoped she didn't insist on helping me, but she stayed by the rail, gazing at the sea. Did she just like her own company, or had she picked up on my desire for it? Either way, she seemed to understand me better than I liked. I tidied up the galley and started working, coiling and stowing the mooring lines. I set the anchor with ease, using the winch motor. It was noisy and time-consuming, but there was no way around it. Emma watched anxiously as the noise grew louder, her gaze fixed on the floating brothel behind us. There was no wind. I started the diesel engine, aiming to put some distance between us and Lucas. I just wanted to be sure, so I started the engine and the houseboat slowly glided away. Emma looked really relaxed, and she even looked more beautiful than I'd ever imagined. She sat next to me, calm and happy, while I steered the boat and watched as Lucas's vessel disappeared from view. I was getting tired of the engine's noise, so I lowered the sails and turned off the engine. It was so quiet. Just the wind, the waves, and the sails. I fed the sails and went back to the helm. We were all alone in the boat. I looked at her from time to time. She was sitting calmly, looking out at the water. With Lucas out of sight, she seemed more relaxed. I thought about how she didn't seem like the type of woman who would give up a successful career. If Sarah were in her shoes, she'd probably be very different. She'd probably be anxious and demanding, but Emma wasn't like that. What if Emma viewed me the same way? I wonder if Sarah will expect me to support her in the lifestyle she's used to, just because I let her come aboard. Maybe that's why she seems so unfazed by everything. Oh, here we go again. Henry Higgins was right. Invite a woman into your life. And my peace of mind vanished. I was done with it, once and for all. I glanced at her, but she was looking at the sunlit ocean beyond the harbor. I reminded myself that she was a model, or rather a former model. They could portray any facade they desired. I shifted in my seat. I looked at the sails, then to starboard. What was her game? My thoughts were interrupted. Hold on, how did she know about that? I stared at her blankly. Well, damn. The morning had been nearly perfect, and now she had to spoil it. Nothing, just a regular guy. I muttered, Sure. Her voice was soft and good. He's clearly well off, sailing solo on a fancy boat, trying to hide his niceness with grunts. She's very attractive. I spotted her first. She definitely needs glasses. We're alone here, and I'm all ears, but I don't want to push. Thanks, she replied, throwing her head back and laughing. I couldn't help but laugh. Playing defense wasn't going so smoothly. Okay, I'll take the bait. What's my next move? She blushed a little. I'm not sure what you're going to say. I know you aim to keep your distance and stay quiet. She took a deep breath and met my gaze. There was a determined look on her face, though I thought I detected sympathy in her eyes. Or was I imagining things? You've been hurt badly. Your instinct is to withdraw and keep everyone at arm's length. It's normal to be cautious because you're worried about getting hurt again. It's natural to be this way. Even animals do it, but you have to eventually start moving forward. You walk and talk, but you're still cautious about getting hurt, especially by women. I understand that, but by isolating yourself from others, you're only hurting yourself. Every time you dwell on your wounds instead of engaging with others, you allow them to hurt you again. Your pain isn't improving, it's getting worse, and you're not even getting anything out of it. I felt sorry for you because you've cut yourself off from society and no one sees you. I imagined myself enduring in dignified solitude, cutting myself off so no one, especially not a woman, could inflict the same pain Sarah had. But what if I was merely brooding? I decided to lay out my case to her, hoping she would quiet down so I could think or brood or whatever. Okay, I was married to my childhood best friend, and it all crashed and burned. She cheated, yeah, and in the end, all she cared about was my money is a big issue for me, so I'm naturally cautious, especially with women who should be occupying my time. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. I'm sorry, but I figured it was something like that. You're allowing her to keep hurting you and preventing you from finding happiness. It's a shame to give her that much control over you. You'll have to address this eventually. You can't just bury it all. It's not healthy. Who better to confide in than someone you'll never see again? I was surprised by her words. It seemed like she had seen she wasn't flirting with me after all. Don't worry, I know you plan to part ways with me at the next port, so your secrets are safe. She paused and then said, How about I share my story? I pondered for a moment if she was willing to share her story. It meant she wasn't prying into mine or trying to dredge up Sarah's pain, which was unsettling, but what if her ordeal was worse than mine and yet she managed it better? I'd have to open up to this intriguing stranger from a completely different world. What would I say? What would become of me then? She interrupted my thoughts, and the silence resumed. Her grin was infectious, like that of a playful child. I almost smiled back, but I caught myself. No attachments, I reminded myself. Don't let her ensnare you too. She was still smirking. Damn, she had me again. I'd better tread carefully around her. Gradually, her smile faded, and her gaze drifted to the distant horizon. She spoke, speaking in a steady monotone voice as if reciting. I grew up in a small town where everyone knew me. Other kids were smarter or more talented, but I was the one expected to make it big and be famous. You know, when all you can do is look pretty, that means a model and a career. I quickly learned I was at the bottom of the ladder. It was nothing like being a princess in my small town. For the first time, I was told I wasn't good enough, time after time, in the harshest terms. She confided in me, her eyes pleading for empathy. Manny, when something you do, like a project or report, is deemed not good, what do you do? It was disheartening, but when you're told you're not good enough, it's brutal. It really takes a toll on you, repeatedly. She paused, turning back to the horizon. Like many models, I began to see my body as separate from myself. It was almost like a tool or a skill set. I did everything to maintain it: exercise, a proper diet, you name it. But I still fell short. I was never chosen. Then I observed the directors favoring girls they knew, those who socialized with them, or higher up. In reality, socializing meant having sex with the director, regardless of their gender. It seemed like the norm, but I resisted at first. The pressure of unemployment was just too much, so I gave in. It wasn't terrible, though. Most were kind and considerate. I had grown accustomed to viewing my body as separate from myself. I just used it to secure a job and stay at work. Eventually, I got a job, and everyone in my hometown was happy to see me in catalogs or ads. I felt like I was burdening the whole village with my hopes and dreams, even though I knew I wouldn't reach the top, and I started to hate my life. I understand girls and abusive relationships more than I used to. I don't know what made me change my mind, but I had been on Lucas cruises before and I knew what to expect. For some reason, whether it was a wager or something else, I had had enough. I hid in my cabin until the thugs forcibly removed me. You witnessed the rest. She paused, meeting my gaze. They didn't think I'd dare to jump. Maybe I wouldn't have, but your boat was nearby, and I overheard your confrontation earlier. I was terrified last night, fearing that Lucas would send his thugs after me. I was relieved. To be just another disposable beauty. I wonder if I foiled their bet. She smiled at the thought. I smiled back, trying to up her. It was still hard to fathom that some might see her as merely a pretty face. I'm done. It's all over now. The village will have to find another to celebrate. So what if I'm jobless and broke? I've endured this before and survived. I'll never sell my body again. I'm not going to let others dictate my worth. I don't know what's next, but whatever it is, I know it will be better because I'm free. She smiled at me, and I was taken aback by her even more radiant expression. Now you think I'm a courtesan. Her smile remained, and her eyes were shining like stars. What could I even say to that? Thankfully, she was likely accustomed to rendering men speechless with her charm. I stumbled through some vague ideas about choice and honesty, hoping she'd rescue me. You know, I'm a maid, she said, stunning me. She laughed again, confirming my enjoyment of her laughter. Remember when I said I began to see my body as separate from my heart, the real me? So yes, men and women used my body, and yes, sometimes I found pleasure in it, but I never truly made love to anyone. She never shared her heart. She gazed at me earnestly before continuing. All I ever wanted was what my mother had, a tranquil life with a loving partner and a home filled with affection. I lost sight of that, but not anymore. Her determination and optimism left me feeling inadequate. I retreated downstairs to conceal my emotions. I returned with 2 glasses of chilled Sauvignon Blanc. We raised a toast to her future, and it struck me that it wasn't just her physical beauty that captivated me but her essence. I decided to share my story to distract myself. She said, "Yes, please, I'm eager to hear your story." "Am I really that transparent?" I replied. "Yes, you are." She then asked, "But I still want to hear it." I assured her that I would address that later. I began by telling her how I met Sarah on my first day of. I met Sarah at school. Some of the other kids were teasing her, so I stepped in. We became close and I helped her with her studies, while she looked after my money. By the time we were 12, we were inseparable. Sarah became very popular, and she didn't want me to have to fight off boys anymore. Despite our friendship, people even thought my mum was in love with me. Emma's voice was filled with horror. "That's awful," she said. "It might have been wrong, but it still affects me." I said, "Maybe your mom was mistaken or intoxicated and got you confused with someone else." I told her not to speak ill of my mother. Emma saw through my facade and laughed. I joined in before continuing. We attended the same university. Sarah reached out, reminiscing about feeling safe with me. She hinted that I had a chance with her. I was really happy and asked her out. She said yes, but I was really disappointed when I found her in bed with another man. I didn't confront them. I just went back to my office and thought about what had happened. Emma nodded, as if she expected me to agree. She cried, apologized, and promised to be faithful. I agreed to forgive her because I wanted her back. Emma asked if I had forgiven her, and I said yes. I said I might have forgiven her for one mistake. But she didn't stick to her word. Emma thought, did she have money when you got married? And why did you say she went after your money after the divorce? Just a thought, what if she thought your wealth meant power in the relationship? Maybe she felt insecure, but I loved her and cared for her. Why was she insecure? Perhaps being dependent is better. Emma suggested that maybe her cheating was an attempt to shift the power dynamic to make. Are you excusing her because you're relying on her? I asked, a little defensive. I don't think you should break promises like that. I think you're trapped, not in pain, but not happy to live again. You need to understand her cruelty. How do you know all this? I asked, with a hint of sarcasm, but she was earnest. I don't know. I guess I just empathize. She smiled sadly, then looked at me. Go ahead, what happened next? I paused. I was getting ready to tell you about the end of my world. It started with a normal snooker night, but then there was a power cut. Instead of going out with my friends for drinks, I decided to have a cozy evening at home with my wife. When I walked into our apartment, I saw that it was all lit up with candles and there was soft music playing. It was like we were on a date. It turned out that one of my friends had told Sarah about it, because I was getting candles for the bathtub. I came across a scene where Sarah and a man were exchanging kisses and bubbles. I was a bit taken aback and unsure how to react. Eventually, I cleared my throat to get their attention. They turned to face me and greeted me with smiles. Jason, the man, introduced himself. That's when I realized what was going on. I saw the end of my marriage and my love life. I was overwhelmed and fought back tears. They reassured me, saying they still loved me. The situation hadn't changed. Sarah even suggested we carry on with the affair, saying she still loved us both. I was too shocked to speak. Sarah smiled, but I didn't look at her. Manny, I've realized I love men. She said it matter-of-factly. Jason's accepted it, and I know you will too. When you see how happy we all are, I'll still be with you most of the time, but now that you know, I'll spend some nights with Jason when you're out with your friends. You won't even notice. And when we start a family, Jason will use protection to ensure the kids are yours. Right, Jason? Jason eagerly agreed, nodding along. He said that our marriage will be stronger this way. Sarah insisted that he keep his promise to be faithful. I interjected, saying that he had been a bit quick to promise, and that I hadn't met Jason yet. Does that justify breaking your promise? I pressed. Manny, don't be melodramatic, she retorted. Think about it. Jason and I have been dating for over 2 months now. Has your love for me? Jason's been around for a while now, and I've noticed things have changed. The sex is better, and he's more spontaneous and unpredictable. But you're still the better lover because you know me so well. It shouldn't be a problem unless you make it one. She showed no remorse, demanding I accept her affair. Her vow of fidelity seemed meaningless as I looked at her and Jason smiling together. Pain crept into my heart. What if I don't agree? I asked. My voice was strained. She smiled, but her smile now held a hand of reproach. I hate to Manny. You need to know what'll happen if you leave me over this. I'll look after Jason and myself. I'll get at least half of everything you own. I hope it never comes to that, but I'll do what I have to. She softened her tone. Remember, I've loved you since you were 6. It shouldn't be difficult. Keep enjoying what you have or risk losing me and half your assets with warm smiles. She and Jason invited me to accept my betrayal. I must have looked as dumbfounded as a cartoon character. Jason chimed in, inviting me to join them. Sarah playfully urged me to blow water at her and kiss Jason on the nose. I'm done, I said, walking away. Their soft chatter followed me as I left, but I was too consumed by the situation to pay attention. I packed an overnight bag and left. It wasn't until later, alone in a hotel room, that I fully processed what had happened. I cried, cursed, and pounded the mattress in frustration when I woke up. Sarah was no longer the woman I loved, she was my. I had to protect my assets, even though I didn't need the money. It was about principle, not paying her for her betrayal. I had a significant advantage that my spouse didn't know about. My wealth wasn't truly mine. It came from a trust fund set up by my grandfather. He was clever and had a cynical view of women. He set up a plan where I'd receive a monthly allowance until I was 40 or after my first divorce. At that point, the full fortune would be mine legally. I had almost no assets when Sarah ended our marriage. As it turned out, the divorce was meant to make me wealthy. I consulted a family lawyer straight away. He told me that the worst-case scenario would be minimal alimony for a short period. I reluctantly accepted this outcome. He handled the legalities, ensuring Sarah couldn't flee, and initiated the divorce process. He predicted things would get interesting once Sarah realized the new reality. Meanwhile, I rented a nice apartment and moved my essentials. Sarah didn't reach out for a week and then sent a message asking if I had got over my hurt feelings and was ready to return home. I didn't respond despite her professed love. She didn't seem to miss me. 2 weeks later, the flood of texts and messages began. It seemed her lawyer had informed her that she wouldn't be as wealthy as she'd expected. She oscillated between professing love, claiming misunderstandings, and urging me to be brave. After all, Jason had tolerated it, why couldn't I suddenly? Everything came to a halt a few days later. Her lawyer presented a post-nuptial agreement claiming I had signed it, offering her $220,000. A prenuptial agreement, which she said I'd signed, offering her $220,000. She said she was entitled to $200,000 a month for life in case of divorce. However, handwriting experts said that wasn't her handwriting. They then tried to accuse me of domestic violence but couldn't provide evidence. They eventually settled for what we'd proposed, $20,000 a month for a year and legal fees. I came out on top, but I felt awful. I avoided women like the plague and retreated into my shell. As I was leaving, I said, "I'm breaking the silence." Emma stayed quiet. I looked at her and saw tears streaming down her face. "You know, she's still beautiful," I thought. "I'm sorry, Manny. I understand your pain." After recounting the ordeal, Emma said, "My anguish has lessened, Manny. I didn't know that." Then she continued, "Manny, you can't continue like this. She's not worth it. She never cared about your life or your happiness. She was letting her bring you down." She said her words with strength and determination, even though her eyes were dry. Emma turned to me. "Manny, you have to live. Letting her destroy you is letting her win." Her words hit me hard. I flinched, sensing the weight behind them. She paused, giving me time to take in her message and then break into a playful smile. "You're a hermit," she teased. Her eyes glinted with mischief. "I suppose so." I admitted my voice was softer than I expected yesterday. I might have worn that label with pride, but today I'm not so sure. "At least you're not one of those guys with a big bushy beard." She joked, and I was grateful for the shift in tone. "Thankfully," I replied, grinning slightly. "Promise me you'll get over this soon, Manny." "You need to start living again," she urged gently, her voice filled with such care that it left me speechless. I nodded in response, unable to find the right words. She smiled, satisfied. "Good," she said, standing up gracefully. "Now that's settled. I'll catch some sun." She moved to the bow, and I followed. I followed her, drawn by her warmth and the easy way she carried herself. It was hard to believe that anyone had ever told her she wasn't pretty enough. In fact, it was unbelievable. I joined her near the mast as she settled down, using my old sweatpants as a cushion. I couldn't deny her beauty. It was effortless, not just something captured by a camera, but beyond her looks and her kindness. She stood out. She was genuine, which is pretty rare. Watching her, I started to question myself. Emma seemed to understand me deeply, even though we'd only known each other for less than 24 hours. Was she right? Should I abandon this isolation I'd imposed on myself? I didn't want to risk another heartbreak like the one Sarah gave me. But if Emma was right, if I was letting my past if she was right, then what was the difference between that and what had happened before? I observed her, noting how she had left her past behind and embraced life again, despite the uncertain future. Her attitude was infectious, and in her presence, my fear of living started to fade. She still felt out of my league, like someone I could never really have. Maybe there was someone, like Emma, there was someone less stunning who I could build a life with. As I watched her, I caught myself staring at her smooth belly and almost exposed chest. Manny, she called, catching my gaze even behind her sunglasses. Models must always have known when someone was looking. Where are we going? She asked. I replied. So that's where you were planning to leave me? She asked, rolling onto her back and removing her sunglasses. No, I don't want to leave you. It's not like that, I replied, feeling flustered. She laughed softly. Sorry, Manny. I shouldn't have teased you. I just miss having someone to joke around with and have fun with. Forgive me, I said, smiling and nodding. I was more than willing to forgive her anything. Then I was reminded of what women were capable of by that nagging voice in the back of my mind. Emma sensed my unease and said softly, No, Manny, I'm not like that. Her voice was gentle but firm. What's happening here? I wondered aloud, feeling caught between my past pain and the present moment. Am I leaving the boat at AIS now? I asked, trying to clear my head. Not unless you want to. Or need to? She replied. You can if you want. I like having you here, but I wouldn't push you. You can stay as long as you like, I managed to say, feeling my words stumble over themselves. She smiled, enjoying my awkwardness. I was planning on stopping at AIS anyway for supplies, and you might want to get some clothes, I said, trying to sound more composed. My plan, she said with a grin. What's wrong, sailor? She struck a playful pose, teasing me. We both laughed, but then she grew more serious. I don't have any money or cards with me. I won't be able to pay you back right away. I pretended to think, approaching her slowly. Maybe I'll find a way for you to pay me back, I said, keeping a straight face. Her expression shifted to apprehension. What do you mean by that? She asked, her voice a little shaky. I've not sailed this boat by myself in a while, so you might as well help, I said seriously. You got me, she replied, playfully slapping my arm. Looks like someone needs a little fun in their life. Deck and I showed her how to tie knots as the sails shielded us from the warm Greek sun. It was hot, so I took off my shirt and we occasionally exchanged glances and smiles. It was strange to be this comfortable around a woman, but it was a feeling I could get used to. Later, we trimmed the sails together more for the experience than necessity. Emma was surprisingly athletic. It was great to watch her move. My bikini-clad colleague helped me maneuver the boat with ease, and we made quite the sight for anyone watching from the waterfront. She followed my instructions flawlessly, which showed there was a lot more to her than just her looks. Afterwards, she borrowed we went back to my place in sweatpants, and then went into town. We went to the bank first, where Emma couldn't access her accounts without ID. So she used my money to shop. I thought she'd go on a spending spree, but she surprised me by picking out just a few items, including sundresses, shorts, and tops. She even asked for my advice. When it came to shoes, she picked practical and tasteful options, nothing extravagant. While she was shopping for undergarments, I grabbed groceries and supplies. By the time we met back at the town square, we were both carrying bags loaded with purchases. I couldn't help but grin as I watched her. Dressed in one of her new sundresses, she looked stunning even in the midday sun. We boarded the boat, stored our things and relaxed. Every time I thought I had gotten used to her beauty, Emma surprised me with a new look or a different side of her personality. She left me feeling grateful. Manny, she said. I'll repay you when I can, maybe by holding on to your savings until you find a job or something, I suggested. Maybe, she replied thoughtfully, but I don't like to be friends with her. Her eyes warmed, and I felt a bit overwhelmed. "We're friends," she reiterated. "Friends help each other, like you did for me last night. Even when you didn't want to." She was right. Friends don't hurt each other, and no matter what, Emma made it clear she wouldn't hurt me. "You know, I don't think I've ever been this at ease with anyone," she said, her voice soft. "Neither have I," I admitted, surprising myself. "One more thing, you know how You always seem to know what I'm thinking," she added, grinning. "How do you do that?" I asked, feigning disappointment. "I was hoping you could read everyone like that and we could rule the world." We both chuckled. She gazed at me thoughtfully and said, "What are the plans for tonight?" I said, my voice betraying no hint of surprise. "I don't really plan much," she replied, her smile suggesting she was amused by my lack of forward planning. "Oh, you're taking me ashore to that seafood place we spotted earlier, and we're going to have a wonderful dinner." "After that," I asked, my curiosity piqued, "where will we head back to?" "The boat, and I'll fill you in on the rest." She winked. We had dinner ashore at a modest seafood restaurant. I briefly worried Emma might feel out of place, but the restaurant's reputation spoke for itself and the friendly atmosphere eased any concern, despite the occasional glance from others. Emma remained unbothered. She was a great comfort to me, keeping me calm with her presence. The fresh seafood was a delight to us both. I was surprised to find myself genuinely enjoying the evening. As we left her hand in mine, we strolled along the waterfront before returning to the boat. Emma gave me a gentle kiss, her gratitude clear. In the way she held me close, Emma whispered, "Thank you. I can't remember the last time I enjoyed a night so much." She glanced away briefly, trying to conceal her tears. After a pause, she turned back to me with a cunning smile, ready for the rest of the plan. "Yeah, I suppose she replied. "I'm sure about that," she replied, teasing and winking with an arch eyebrow. Her earlier words echoed in my mind. "Promise me you'll start living again." "Manny," I replied. "Okay, I'm game. What's the deal?" I adopted a confident stance with my hands on my hips and asked, "Is this where you seduce me?" I felt awkward as Emma grinned at me, making me even more flustered. "Well, part of you understands, right?" Her gaze dropped to the noticeable bulge in my pants, and I realized I was already aroused even though she hadn't touched me. "I thought you didn't want to rush, Emma," I said, my voice shaky. "Don't worry, Manny. Lovemaking isn't on the agenda." She reassured me with a sweet smile. "Huh!" I thought it was my default response around her. "We're going to make love," she said, her eyes serious but her smile still warm. "Emma, you could have anyone." "Why me?" I asked. I was confused by her interest. "We're falling for each other, haven't you noticed?" she replied gently, her eyes sparkling. I was taken aback for a moment. "Manny, I'm not Sarah. I would never hurt you like she did," Emma said softly, her tone so genuine that I couldn't help but believe her. Without a word, she pulled me close for a kiss. It was incredible, like nothing I'd ever experienced before. When we parted, I saw tears in her eyes, and I was surprised to find my own eyes getting moist too. The connection between us felt almost overwhelming. She held on to my shirt tightly, then pulled me towards her. She led me toward my quarters with a sense of urgency in her movements. She gently pushed me onto the bed. "You're so beautiful," I managed to say. I was still processing everything that had just happened. "Why me?" I asked. "Was it my wealth?" Emma watched me with a satisfied smile. "No," she replied. "Manny, I love you, not your money. Don't misunderstand. Money is helpful, but using a man for it repulses me. I'll sign anything you want, I'll even blur it out if you like, to ease the tension. Whatever you want." She laughed. "Well, why not, just in case we tie the knot one day? You never know," she said with a cheeky grin. I couldn't help but laugh. It could be worse, I thought. "Am I crazy?" she added. "I'm on birth control. You're actually the first guy I've been with without protection, so don't worry, you're in the clear." "Wow, what a fool I've been," I muttered, feeling both embarrassed and relieved. She laughed at my reaction. "You're too kind, Manny. We need to figure out our next move. Well, the home port of this boat is on the coast of Italy, but I'm not sure if that's what you meant. Do you have a car there? Yeah, a big X5. Okay, one of those SUVs, right? So we'll drive to Milan and maybe stop by to pick up my stuff and whatever's left of my old life if that's okay with you. I suggested. Sure, why not? Plus, it's pretty much on the way to Germany. She agreed. All right, we're going to have a blast. I've got a lot of work ahead. I said. Your job? She asked. Yeah, I've got to. I told her, with a grin, that I needed to convince myself that good women were still out there. She teased me, saying, Oh, so you're opening up to the female population again? I told her that I wasn't joking and that my motives were purely selfish. She laughed but then admitted that it all seemed too good to be true. We sailed back to Italy, where we spent 4 idyllic weeks soaking up the sun, enjoying incredible food and feeling a sense of freedom. We avoided talking about the future, past divorces, or anything that might cast a shadow over our present. Upon arrival, we packed up the boat in silence, both dreading the return to reality. The drive to Milan and then on to Germany was tense, filled with unspoken fears. Back in my apartment, the spark we had shared on the road began to flicker out, replaced by an undercurrent of tension. I was afraid of losing her, and she seemed distant, though she never said why. We sat together on the couch watching TV. She snuggled against me, reminding me of her warmth just as I was about to suggest heading to the bedroom. The doorbell rang. I'll get it, I said, breaking the silence when I opened the door. I felt my heart drop. Standing there was Sarah, looking as stunning and manipulative as ever. Finally, she made it, she said, stepping forward as if nothing had happened between us. I felt a wave of disgust, but I didn't respond. She stepped back and studied me. You've been soaking up the sun, she said, her tone dripping with insincerity. Thank you, I replied, my voice cold. Are you going to invite me in? She asked, expecting the answer to be yes. Please come in, Sarah said from behind me. Her voice was calm but firm. I stepped aside reluctantly. Thank you, Sarah said as she entered. She turned to Emma. I'm Sarah. I'm aware, Emma responded coolly. The tension in the room was palpable. If words were blades, the air would have been soaked in blood. Have a seat, Emma offered. Thank you, Sarah replied, sitting down stiffly. So you're a friend of Manny? Emma asked, her tone innocent. I'm his girlfriend, Sarah declared, her tone accusatory. Emma raised an eyebrow. Are you insinuating I'm a courtesan? She asked Sarah. Well, you're not unattractive, and Manny is quite wealthy. I wouldn't suspect prostitution, but maybe something close to that? Emma responded, her voice sharp. I'm not with him for his money. Sarah scoffed. Right. I've known him a lot longer than you. I love him. I love him too. Emma replied. No, it's not about his wealth. Sarah sneered. He's on a different level than you. I'm not buying this for a second. Emma stood tall, her voice steady. I don't need you to believe it. I know what's real. I stepped forward, ready to intervene. That's enough, Sarah. Sarah's face showed her anger. Manny, you're making a mistake. I'm not. It's time for you to go, I said firmly. You'll regret this. Sarah, I warned her with a look of bitterness, Manny, Emma said before I could finish. Emma leaped into my arms and kissed me. Passionately, yes, Manny, yes, I will, she said through tears of joy as Sarah slumped out, slamming the door behind her. I held Emma close, both of us overwhelmed by the moment. We'd come full circle. I'd finally let go of the past, and for the first time, I was truly ready for the future, our future.